flashlight beam caught something wrong. Thomas Green had been a security guard at the Royal Museum for 11 years. He had walked these halls thousands of times. He knew every display case, every shadow, every reflection. But tonight, something about the state crown looked different. It was 2:47 in the morning. The museum was silent except for the hum of climate control and the soft echo of his footsteps on marble floors. Thomas stopped in front of the crown's reinforced glass case. The centerpiece diamond, the famous sovereign, star sat in its gold setting, like it always did. But the light wasn't hitting it right. Thomas moved his flashlight slowly across the surface. The other gems blazed with color rubies like drops of blood, emeralds deep as forests, sapphires cold as winter sky. But the sovereign star looked dull, cloudy, almost lifeless. His chest tightened. He stepped closer until his breath fogged the bulletproof glass. Something was very wrong. The sovereign star was a 105-carat diamond worth £42 million. It had been cut from a legendary stone found in South Africa in 1889. Kings and queens had worn it. Wars had been fought over gems like it, and now at nearly 3 in the morning, a night guard was staring at what looked like a piece of glass. Thomas's hand trembled as he reached for his radio. His mouth went dry. If he was right, this was the biggest theft in British history. If he was wrong, he'd look like a fool who couldn't tell a diamond from a flashlight reflection. He pressed the button. Control, this is Green on level 2. I need someone to check the crown jewels display. Now, static crackled. Then a bored voice. Green, it's 3 in the morning. What's the problem? The sovereign star. Something's wrong with it. Wrong how? Thomas swallowed hard. I think it's fake. The line went silent for 3 long seconds. Say that again? I think someone swapped the diamond. It doesn't look real. The bored tone vanished. Don't touch anything. Don't move. I'm sending security and calling the director. Thomas stood frozen in the dark gallery. His flashlight beam stayed locked on the crown. Around him, the shadows seemed to press closer. Somewhere in this building, maybe? Watching him right now was someone who had done the impossible. They had stolen from the most protected collection in Britain. And if you want to know how they pulled off the perfect heist, make sure you're subscribed, because this story gets darker than anyone expected. 15 minutes later, the gallery blazed with emergency lights. Director Margaret Ashford arrived in a wrinkled coat thrown over pajamas, her gray hair uncombed, her face pale. Behind her came the senior guards and the head of museum security, all moving fast. Thomas stepped aside as Margaret approached the case. She pulled reading glasses from her pocket and leaned close to the glass, studying the diamond from every angle. Nobody spoke. Margaret's hands slowly curled into fists. When she turned around, her expression was carved from stone. Open it, she said quietly. The security chief hesitated. Director, if we break the seal open, it. 2 guards moved forward with electronic keys. The case required 3 separate codes, 2 physical keys, and a biometric scan. The locks disengaged with soft clicks. The glass panels slid apart with a whisper of hydraulics. Margaret reached inside with gloved hands. She lifted the crown carefully, tilting it toward the light. The sovereign star sat in its setting, looking as magnificent as ever to everyone else. But Margaret's jaw tightened. She pulled a jeweler's loop from her pocket and examined the stone up close. 5 seconds passed. 10. 20. When she lowered the loop, her hand was shaking. Call the police, she whispered. Call the Prime Minister's office and lock down this entire building. She looked at each person with eyes full of horror. The diamond is cubic zirconia. Very good cubic zirconia, but fake. The room exploded into chaos. Thomas felt the floor tilt beneath him. Someone had stolen a £42 million diamond from the most secure museum in London, and nobody had any idea when or how they'd done it. By dawn, the Royal Museum was surrounded by police vehicles. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen stood in the gallery, watching forensic teams dust every surface for prints. She had worked art theft for 9 years, recovered stolen Rembrandts and smuggled antiquities. But she'd never seen anything like this. "Walk me through your security," she said to Director Ashford. Margaret's voice was hoarse from answering the same questions for hours. "The crown is displayed in a reinforced case. Bulletproof glass, 3 inches thick. The case is alarmed motion sensors, pressure sensors, glass break sensors. The gallery has 47 cameras covering every angle. There are guards on patrol every hour. The diamond itself is photographed and documented weekly." When was the last documentation? 4 days ago. Margaret pulled out her phone, hands still shaking, and showed Sarah a high-resolution photo. The sovereign star blazed with perfect clarity, unmistakably real. "So sometime in the last 4 days, someone made the switch," Sarah said. "Who has access to open the case?" "Only 3 people. Myself, the head curator Dr. James Whitmore, and the chief conservator Linda Marsh. Any opening requires 2 of us present together, plus armed security." "Were there any openings in the last 4 days?" Margaret's face went gray. "Yes, 2 days ago. Wednesday afternoon. We removed the crown for a scheduled cleaning and inspection. Linda and I were both there, plus 2 guards. The entire process took 40 minutes. We photographed everything, cleaned each stone, checked the settings, and locked it back up." Sarah felt her instincts kick in. "Who did the actual cleaning?" "Linda. She's been our chief conservator for 15 years. She's beyond reproach." "Everyone's beyond reproach until they're not," Sarah said quietly. "I need to speak with her immediately." An hour later, Linda Marsh sat across from Sarah in an interview room. She was a small woman in her 50s, with careful hands and exhausted eyes. She'd been crying. "I cleaned that crown myself," Linda said. "I examined every stone. The sovereign star was real. I'm certain of it." "Walk me through the process," Sarah said. "Every detail." Linda took a shaky breath. "Margaret and I opened the case at 2 p.m. The guards were standing right behind us. I wore conservation gloves. I removed the crown and placed it on the examination table under the lights. I cleaned each stone individually with special solution and soft brushes. I used a jeweler's loupe to check for any damage or loose settings. Did you ever leave the room?" "No, never. Margaret was there the entire time. So were the guards." "What about the diamond itself?" "Did you examine it closely?" "Of course. I spent extra time on the sovereign star because it's the most valuable. I looked at it under magnification. I saw the internal characteristics, the tiny inclusions that make it unique. It was real." Sarah leaned forward. "Could someone have swapped it after you finished? While you were putting the crown back?" Linda shook her head firmly. "Impossible. I carried it directly from the table to the case. 5 steps. It was in my hands the whole time. Then Margaret and I locked it together." "What happened to the cleaning supplies afterward?" "I packed everything into my conservation kit. Took it back to my lab. That's standard procedure." Something cold touched Sarah's spine. "Is your lab secure?" "It's locked. Only I have access." "But you left the kit there?" "Overnight?" Linda hesitated. The silence stretched out. "Yes," she finally whispered. "I left it in the lab." Sarah stood up quickly. "Show me now." They moved through the museum's back corridors, past offices and storage rooms, down a flight of stairs. Linda's lab was in the basement, a clean, organized space filled with microscopes, tools, and chemical supplies. The door was locked. Linda's keycard opened it. Everything looked normal. Workbenches clean. Tools in place. The conservation kit sat on the counter where Linda had left it. Sarah pulled on latex gloves and opened the kit. Brushes, solution bottles, soft cloths, a jeweler's loupe, and at the bottom, wrapped in conservation paper, something small and hard. Sarah's breath caught. She carefully unfolded the paper. A diamond blazed up at her. Even in the fluorescent basement light, it burned with inner fire. Perfect, flawless, real. Linda gasped. That's impossible." Sarah stared at the stone. Her mind raced through the implications. Someone hadn't stolen the sovereign star during the cleaning. Someone had stolen it afterward from this lab and replaced it with the fake. Then they'd left the real diamond here, wrapped up like a gift. But why? Why go through the trouble of a perfect heist just to leave the evidence behind? Unless this wasn't about theft at all. Sarah looked up at Linda. Who else knows about this lab? Who has access to the building after hours? Linda's face had gone white. Just the staff and the security guards. How many guards? 32 on rotation. Sarah felt the pieces starting to move in her mind, but the picture wasn't clear yet. Someone inside the museum had made the switch. Someone with knowledge, access, and opportunity. Someone who wanted the diamond found. I need a list, Sarah said. Every staff member, every guard, everyone who was in this building over the last 4 days. And I need to know if anyone has been acting strangely. Linda nodded. Still staring at the diamond in Sarah's hand? Outside the lab, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Quick. Urgent. A young constable appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. Inspector Chen? You need to come upstairs. Right now, what is it? The constable's face was pale. One of the security guards didn't show up for his shift this morning. We sent officers to his flat. Sarah's chest tightened. And he's gone. Completely cleared out. But he left something behind. The missing guard's name was David Hoffman. Sarah stood in his empty apartment, staring at the words spray-painted across the living room wall in red. Look closer at who you trust. The flat had been stripped bare. No furniture. No personal items. Just those 7 words and the chemical smell of fresh paint. He cleared out in a hurry, said Constable Brennan, holding up evidence bags. Found rental truck receipts in the trash dated yesterday, Wednesday morning, before his night shift. Sarah's mind spun. David Hoffman had worked the museum for 6 years. Clean record. Good performance reviews. Quiet, reliable, never caused problems. And 2 days ago, he'd vanished. Leaving behind a message that felt less like a confession and more like a warning. Pull everything on Hoffman, Sarah ordered. Bank records, phone records, associates, family. I want to know everywhere he's been in the last month.
Oh.
She turned back to the wall. The words seemed to pulse with meaning. Look closer at who you trust. Not I took it. Not I'm sorry. A message pointing somewhere else. Sarah pulled out her phone and called the museum. This is D. Chen. I need Thomas Green in my office in 20 minutes. Thomas sat across from her, still in his security uniform, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept since he'd spotted the fake diamond. Tell me about David Hoffman, Sarah said. Thomas blinked. David. Why? He's missing. Cleared out his apartment. Left a message behind. Thomas's face went slack. David, no? That's. He wouldn't. You know him well? We've worked together for 6 years. He's a good man. Honest. He sends money to his mother in Poland every month. Thomas trailed off, something changing in his expression. Wait, what? David wasn't scheduled to work Wednesday night. The night I found the fake, he switched shifts with someone at the last minute. Said he had a family emergency. Sarah's pulse quickened. Who did he switch with? Marcus Webb. But Marcus is. He's one of the senior guards. Been here longer than anyone. I need to talk to Webb. Now, 20 minutes later, Marcus Webb walked into the interview room. He was 58, broad-shouldered, with the straight posture of a former military man. His face was calm, almost bored. I understand you have questions about David, Marcus said, settling into his chair. You switched shifts with him Wednesday night? Why? He asked me to. Said his mother was sick, needed to visit her in hospital. Did you verify that? Marcus shrugged. Wasn't my job to verify. David's a friend. He needed help. Tell me about your relationship with David Hoffman, or colleagues. Sometimes grab a pint after work. Nothing unusual. Sarah studied his face. To calm, to controlled. What about your relationship with Linda Marsh? Something flickered behind Marcus's eyes. Just for a second. The conservator? I know her professionally. Why? Her lab is where we found the real diamond. Hidden in her conservation kit? Marcus's expression didn't change. Then it sounds like Linda is your thief. Except Linda was never alone with the kit after the cleaning. But you know what's interesting, Marcus? The lab is on your patrol route. You pass by it 4 times every night shift, along with 5 other guards. But you're the only one with a key. The room went very quiet. Marcus leaned back in his chair. I have authorization. Senior guards have access to all service areas. It's protocol. So you could have entered Linda's lab Wednesday night, after she left, taken the real diamond from her kit, replaced it with the fake in the display case, then put the real one back in the kit for us to find. Marcus smiled. It was a cold smile. Could have, but didn't, and you can't prove otherwise. David's message said to look closer at who we trust. He was pointing us toward you, wasn't he? David was clearly disturbed. Maybe he felt guilty about something. Sarah slid a file across the table. Your bank records. Large cash deposits over the last 6 months, £40,000 total, unexplained. Marcus glanced at the papers. Savings, inheritance, private matters. From a security guard's salary, I live simply. Sarah leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. You needed a partner. Someone to take the fall while you walked away clean. You picked David because he was young, trusting, desperate for money to help his sick mother. You convinced him it would be easy. Swap the diamond during the cleaning, blame Linda, or the system. But David got cold feet. He realized you were setting him up. So he ran and left us a message. Not a confession, but a warning about you. Marcus's jaw tightened. Interesting theory. Prove it. The real diamond was left behind because David put it back. He couldn't go through with stealing it. But you'd already been paid by whoever wanted the stone, hadn't you? You needed to complete the job, but David had ruined it. So you're in a difficult position now. I'm in no position at all, Marcus said quietly, because I didn't do anything. Sarah watched his eyes. She was close to something. She could feel it. But Marcus was too calm, too confident she was missing something. The interview room door opened. Constable Brennan looked shaken. Inspector. A word. Sarah stepped outside. Brennan handed her a tablet showing security footage. We've been reviewing recordings from Wednesday night, Brennan said. There's something you need to see. Sarah watched the timestamp. 3:47 a.m. Thursday. The camera showed the exterior service entrance of the museum. The door opened from inside. A figure stepped out, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Marcus Webb, clear as day. We've got him, Sarah breathed. Wait, Brennan said. Keep watching, the footage continued. Marcus walked 10 steps from the door, then stopped, turned around, and someone else stepped out of the shadows behind. Him. Sarah's blood went cold. Director Margaret Ashford approached Marcus, her face tight with anger. They argued no sound on the footage, but their body language was violent. Margaret grabbed the wrapped bundle from Marcus's hands. They struggled briefly. Then Margaret shoved him away and disappeared back into the building with the bundle. Marcus stood alone in the dark for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. The footage ended. Sarah stood frozen, her mind rewriting everything she thought she knew. There's more, Brennan said quietly. We tracked Margaret's movements that night. After she went back inside, she went directly to Linda's lab, stayed there for 18 minutes, then returned to her office. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the tablet. The director of the Royal Museum, the person everyone trusted most. She walked back into the interview room. Marcus looked up at her, and this time, his smile was genuine. Figured it out yet, detective? He asked softly. Marcus Webb sat in the interview room, no longer playing games. You want the truth? He said. Fine, but you're not going to like it. Sarah activated the recording device. Tell me everything. Marcus took a long breath. 3 months ago, I noticed something odd during a routine patrol. Margaret Ashford, accessing the crown jewels display at 4 a.m. No scheduled maintenance. No witnesses. Just her. What was she doing? At the time, I had no idea. But I started watching. Keeping notes. Over the next few weeks, I saw her access the display 6 more times. Always alone. Always late at night. Always when she thought nobody was watching. Sarah's chest tightened. Did you confront her? Eventually, she told me to mind my own business. Said it was director's privilege. But I'm not stupid, detective. I've worked security for 30 years. I know when something's wrong. Marcus leaned forward. So I installed a hidden camera. Just a small one, tucked behind a ventilation grate. And I caught her. Caught her doing what? Practicing. She had a jeweler's kit. Professional tools. She was removing the sovereign star, examining it, putting it back, over and over, like she was rehearsing. Sarah felt ice in her veins. Rehearsing for the theft? That's what I thought. So I copied the footage and confronted her properly. Told her I'd go to the police. Marcus's voice went flat. She offered me £200,000 to keep quiet. And you took it. No. Marcus's eyes hardened. I told her to go to hell. That's when things got complicated. He shifted in his chair, and for the first time, Sarah saw fear in his face. Margaret said if I reported her, she'd destroy my life. She had connections, power, resources. But more than that, Marcus paused. She told me the diamond I'd seen her remove and replace wasn't the sovereign star anymore. She'd already swapped it weeks earlier. The real diamond was long gone. Sarah's mind raced. She'd already stolen it? That's what she claimed. Said she'd been making the switch gradually, replacing the real stone with increasingly better fakes over months. By the time I caught her, the real sovereign star had been gone for weeks. And if I reported her now, she'd make it look like I was the thief. She had security footage of me on patrol near the display. She had edited recordings. She'd created a perfect frame so you were trapped. Worse than trapped. She made me complicit. She deposited money in my accounts. Smaller amounts, gradual, but enough to look suspicious. She created a paper trail pointing to me. And then she told me her plan. Marcus's voice dropped to almost a whisper. She wanted to stage a discovery. Make it look like the theft had just happened. Cover her tracks completely. That's why she scheduled the cleaning with Linda. Yes. During that cleaning, Margaret swapped the good fake she'd been using with a cheaper one, something that would be noticed eventually. She wanted the fake found, but not immediately. She needed time to finalize whatever she was doing with the real stone. But something went wrong, Sarah said. Marcus nodded slowly. David Hoffman. He came to me 2 weeks ago, nervous, scared. Said Margaret had approached him with an offer. £20,000 to help with a special project? David needed money. Desperately, his mother's medical bills were crushing him. But he was suspicious. He asked me what to do. What did you tell him? I told him to run. Get out of London. Go somewhere safe. Marcose's hands clenched into fists. But David wouldn't leave his mother. So instead he tried to be clever. He told Margaret, yes, he'd help. Then he came to me with a plan. He'd go along with whatever Margaret wanted, but he'd gather evidence. Proof we could use to expose her. That's why he switched shifts Wednesday night. Margaret told him to be off duty that night. Said she needed him unavailable, establishing an alibi. But David realized that meant she was making her final move. So he switched with me, stayed at the museum, tried to catch her in the act. Sarah's pulse hammered. What happened? I don't know exactly. I wasn't there. I'd taken his shift, remember? But based on the footage you showed me, Marcus swallowed hard. David must have confronted her. Caught her moving the real diamond. They struggled. Margaret took the diamond from him and put it back in Linda's lab, probably planning to discover it later as evidence against Linda or me or whoever she decided to frame. And David ran. Wouldn't you? He was a 26-year-old immigrant guard who just physically fought with one of the most powerful museum directors in Britain. He knew nobody would believe him. So he left that message and disappeared. Sarah sat back, her mind processing. The story fit the evidence. But something still felt wrong. Margaret already stole the diamond weeks ago, Sarah said slowly. Why is the real sovereign star still here? We found it in Linda's lab. That doesn't make sense. Marcus's face went pale. What? The diamond we found this morning? It's real. We've had experts verify it. That's the actual sovereign star. That's impossible, Marcus whispered. Margaret told me she lied to you. Sarah leaned across the table. She never stole the diamond at all. This whole thing was about something else. The pieces suddenly clicked together in Sarah's mind, and the picture they formed was far darker than theft. She wasn't stealing the diamond, Sarah said quietly. She was replacing it with a fake to hide the fact that the real diamond was never authentic to begin with. Marcus stared at her. What are you saying? The sovereign star and the crown jewels. The diamond that's been on display for decades. What if it was always fake? What if someone years ago stole the real diamond and nobody ever knew, but we just found the real one in Linda's lab, planted there recently? Sarah stood up quickly. Margaret didn't steal the diamond. She discovered the original theft, and she's been desperately trying to cover it up before anyone else figured it out. Marcus's face drained of color. If that got out, the scandal would destroy the Royal Museum. Maybe the entire royal collection. Exactly. So Margaret staged this whole situation. She created a crisis she could control, with suspects she could manipulate. She needed the fake discovered, but in a way where she could manage the investigation, direct blame wherever necessary, and ultimately produce the real diamond as recovered. The museum looks competent. The crown is restored. And nobody ever asks the truly dangerous question, which is, Sarah met his eyes. Who stole the original diamond, and when? Somewhere in the museum above them, Margaret Ashford was waiting, confident, in control. She had no idea her carefully constructed plan was falling apart. But Sarah knew one thing now, with absolute certainty. This investigation wasn't about a theft that happened this week. It was about a theft that happened decades ago, and someone had been covering it up all this time. Sarah found Margaret Ashford in her office, sitting perfectly still behind her desk. The director looked up when Sarah entered. Her face was composed, but her hands were gripping the armrests too tightly. Director Ashford, Sarah said quietly. We need to talk about the real crime. Margaret's jaw tightened. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Sarah closed the door and sat down. You discovered that the sovereign star in the crown was fake. Not this week. Not this month. You found out sometime in the past year, didn't you? Silence stretched between them. When? Sarah pressed. Margaret's facade cracked. Her shoulders sagged. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. 14 months ago. How did you find out? Margaret stood and walked to the window, her back to Sarah. We were preparing for a major insurance review. The insurers wanted new documentation, professional gemological analysis of every stone in the collection. Routine procedure. We'd done it before. But this time, they sent a different expert. Someone more thorough, and he noticed. She, Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo. She spent 3 hours examining the crown. Margaret's voice trembled. When she finished, she asked to speak with me privately. She was very polite, very professional. She showed me her findings. The sovereign star was cubic zirconia. Excellent quality, but unmistakably fake. Sarah felt the weight of those words. What did you do? I panicked. I asked her to wait, told her I needed to investigate. She agreed. She understood the implications. I had 48 hours before she had to file her official report. Margaret turned around and her eyes were haunted. Do you understand what this meant, detective? The crown jewel of Britain's royal collection was a fake. The scandal would be global. Questions about every piece in our collection. Our reputation destroyed. My career finished. So you decided to cover it up. I decided to fix it. Quietly. Professionally. Margaret's voice hardened. I had to find out when the switch happened and recover the real diamond before anyone else knew. How did you even start? Margaret walked back to her desk and pulled out a locked drawer. She removed a thick file and dropped it in front of Sarah. I spent the next year investigating in secret, going through every record, every document, every photograph of the crown dating back to when the diamond was first installed in 1892. I hired private consultants discreetly, under false names, to examine historical photos and verify authenticity markers. Sarah opened the file. Inside were hundreds of pages authentication reports, historical photographs, analysis documents. What did you find? Sarah asked. The switch happened in 1983, during a cleaning and restoration project. I found discrepancies in the photographic record from that period. The diamond before the cleaning had certain visible inclusions. The diamond after had different ones. Subtle, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. But definitely different stones. Who was responsible for the 1983 restoration? Margaret's face went rigid. The chief conservator at the time was a man named Robert Marsh. Marsh? Linda Marsh's father. Yes. The room seemed to tilt. Sarah gripped the edge of the desk. Linda's father stole the Sovereign Star 40 years ago. That's my belief. Robert Marsh died 15 years ago, but I found evidence in archived financial records. Large unexplained deposits shortly after the 1983 restoration. Properties purchased, wealth that didn't match his salary. He sold the diamond and lived off the proceeds for the rest of his life. Does Linda know? I don't think so. She was a child when it happened. She followed her father into conservation work because she admired him. She has no idea what he did. Margaret's voice cracked. But I couldn't risk it. If this came out, Linda would be investigated. Her career destroyed by association, and she's brilliant. Dedicated, she doesn't deserve that. You decided to fake a theft and plant the real diamond where it could be found. I spent months tracking down the Sovereign Star. Robert Marsh sold it to a private collector in Dubai in 1984. That collector died in 2019, and the stone went to his son, who had no idea what it was. I negotiated with him through intermediaries. Paid from my personal accounts, everything I'd saved, plus loans I'll be repaying for the rest of my life. I got the diamond back 3 months ago. Sarah stared at her. Then why not just quietly swap it back? Put the real diamond in the crown and destroy the fake. Problem solved, because of the insurance documentation. Dr. Tanaka had already photographed the fake and logged it next into the authentication database. If I just swapped the stones, the next review would show different inclusions, different markers. The new diamond wouldn't match the records. It would trigger an investigation anyway. So you needed a crisis. A theft that explained why the diamond looked different. Margaret nodded miserably. I planned to stage a discovery, make it look like someone had recently swapped the stone. Investigate thoroughly, but control the narrative, then recover the real diamond. The insurance records would be updated legitimately. The crown would have the authentic stone again, and nobody would ever look back at 1983. But Marcus Webb caught you practicing the swap. Yes, he was smarter than I expected. I had to bring him into the plan, or at least make him think he was in the plan, while I actually prepared to frame him if necessary. I'm not proud of that. And David Hoffman? Pain flickered across Margaret's face. I needed someone young, innocent, easily scared. Someone the police would believe ran because of guilt. I offered him money to help with what I told him was a security test. But David started asking questions. Got suspicious? When he confronted me Wednesday night, Margaret's voice broke. We fought. I was trying to explain, to make him understand I wasn't stealing anything. But he wouldn't listen. He ran. Sarah looked at the broken woman in front of her. A director who'd made terrible choices trying to protect the museum she loved. You realize, Sarah said quietly, that this is still conspiracy to defraud. Obstruction of justice. You've committed multiple crimes trying to cover up your father's crime. Robert Marsh wasn't my father. Both women turned. Linda Marsh stood in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes blazing. How long have you been standing there? Margaret whispered. Long enough. Linda stepped inside and closed the door. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. My father was many things. A brilliant conservator. A kind man. But he was also a thief. I've known for 5 years. Sarah's mind reeled. You knew? I found letters after my mother died. Hidden in her belongings? Letters from the buyer in Dubai? References to the project and payments? My father's handwriting. Ah! Linda's voice cracked. I spent years trying to verify, trying to prove I was wrong. But the evidence was overwhelming. My father stole the Sovereign Star and sold it, and my mother knew. She helped him cover it up. Why didn't you come forward? Sarah asked. Because I was a coward, Linda said simply. I told myself it was too long ago. That my father was dead, my mother was dead. What good would it do? But really, I was protecting myself, my career, my reputation. She looked at Margaret. When you asked me to help clean the crown, I wondered if you knew. If this was some kind of test? But you seemed so normal. So I thought maybe I was safe. Maybe I could just keep pretending. I was trying to protect you, Margaret said. By framing innocent people. By terrorizing David Hoffman? By making Marcus Webb look like a criminal? Linda's eyes filled with tears. You can't fix the past by creating new crimes, Margaret. Sarah stood up slowly. You're both right about one thing. If this becomes public, the scandal will be massive. The museum's reputation, possibly the entire royal collection, will be questioned. So what do we do? Margaret whispered. Sarah looked at both women. The director who'd tried to save the museum by breaking every rule. The conservator who'd hidden her father's crime out of shame and fear. We tell the truth, Sarah said. All of it. We recover David Hoffman and clear his name. We restore the real Sovereign Star to the crown with full documentation of what happened. And we let the world decide what comes next. My career is over, Margaret said. Yes, Sarah agreed. But the alternative is letting this corruption continue. Letting David Hoffman live as a fugitive. Letting Marcus Webb take the fall. You made bad choices, but you can still make one good one. Margaret sat down heavily. After a long moment, she nodded. Linda walked to the desk and stood beside the director. I'll testify. About my father. About everything I found. It's time. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Justice wouldn't be clean or simple, but it would be real. She pulled out her phone to call her team. There was still so much work to do. 3 weeks later, Thomas Green stood in the gallery, watching them reinstall the crown. The museum had been closed to the public for the investigation. Now, in the quiet morning light, conservation experts worked carefully to place the Sovereign Star back into its setting, the real one. Finally, Thomas glanced at the man standing beside him. David Hoffman had returned to London 2 days after the truth came out. He looked thinner, tired, but relieved. The terror was gone from his eyes. How's your mother? Thomas asked quietly. Better. The treatment's working. David managed a small smile. And with the compensation the museum's paying for what they put me through, I can actually afford the full course of medications. You're not coming back, though. To the job? No. David shook his head. Too many memories here now. But I'm okay. I have other options. Thomas understood. Some places held too much darkness to return to. Behind them, Detective Inspector Sarah Chen approached with a folder under her arm. She'd been at the museum almost every day since the case broke, tying up loose ends. Final report's ready, she said. Thought you'd want to know the conclusion. Thomas and David both turned. Margaret Ashford has been charged with conspiracy to defraud, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering, Sarah continued. She's resigned from her position. Likely facing 2 years in prison, possibly suspended sentence, given the circumstances. And Linda? Thomas asked. What? No charges. She came forward voluntarily, cooperated fully. The CPS determined her father's crime isn't her responsibility, and her silence about it, while ethically questionable, wasn't legally prosecutable. Sarah paused. She's resigned as well. Says she can't stay here after everything. What about Marcus Webb? Released without charges, his involvement was minimal, and Margaret's coercion was documented. He's keeping his job, though he's been moved to a different location. Sarah's expression softened. He asked me to give you this, David. She handed David an envelope. Inside was a check for £10,000 and a short note for your mother's treatment. What I should have done from the start? Megawatt David stared at the check, his eyes glistening. In the gallery, the conservators finished their work. The crown sat in its case once more, the sovereign star blazing with authentic fire. It's strange, Thomas said. All this happened because one man stole a diamond 40 years ago. Robert Marsh. Did you ever find out why he did it? Sarah shook her head. Linda showed me his letters. He was gambling. Deep in debt, desperate, he saw an opportunity during the restoration and took it. Then spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, afraid someone would discover what he'd done. 40 years of fear, David murmured. Was the money worth it? It never is, Sarah said. They stood in silence, watching light play across the crown. History, beauty, secrets. The public reopening is tomorrow, Thomas said. People will come to see the crown like always. Stare at the sovereign star. Take photos. And now, they'll know its whole story. Some of them will, Sarah corrected. Most people don't read museum placards carefully. They'll see a pretty diamond and move on. But the ones who do read will learn something important. What's that? David asked. That even in the most protected, most honored places, humans are still human. We make mistakes, lie. We try to cover up the truth, but eventually the truth comes out. Sarah looked at both young men, and when it does, you have to decide who you want to be. Someone who keeps lying, or someone who faces what happened and tries to make it right. Thomas thought about that night 3 weeks ago. The moment his flashlight caught something wrong, he could have ignored it, convinced himself he was imagining things, walked away. Instead, he'd pressed his radio button and changed everything. Do you think Margaret Ashford was trying to make it right? Thomas asked. Or just trying to save herself? Both, Sarah said. People are complicated. She genuinely loved this museum, wanted to protect it. But she also wanted to protect her own career, her own reputation. She made terrible choices for mixed motives. That's the honest truth. Not a hero, not a villain. Just a person who failed. David folded the check carefully and put it in his pocket. I'm going to visit her, Margaret, after the sentencing. Thomas looked at him in surprise. Why? Because she needs to know I'm okay. That her mistakes didn't destroy me. David's voice was quiet but firm. Someone has to break the cycle of fear and silence. Might as well be me. Sarah smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. You're a good man, David Hoffman. I'm trying to be. They left the gallery together, walking past displays of ancient treasures and modern wonders. Behind them, the crown sat in its case, finally holding the gem it was always meant to hold. Outside, the morning sun broke through London's clouds. People were already gathering at the museum entrance waiting for the reopening. Tourists with cameras, school groups with clipboards, families with excited children. Life continuing. History being made and remade. Thomas would return to his rounds tonight. Different now, but still important. Still watching. Still caring. David would start a new job next month. Something different. Something that didn't carry the weight of what had happened here. Sarah would move on to her next case. Another mystery. Another truth waiting to be uncovered. And in the gallery, the sovereign star would blaze with its own complex history. A stone mined from the earth in 1889, cut and polished, set in a crown. Stolen in 1983, sold and hidden, lost and found. Real Thomas stopped at the museum steps and looked back at the building. Solid, ancient, full of stories. You know what I learned from all this? He said Sarah and David waited. That paying attention matters. That one person noticing something wrong can change everything. Thomas smiled slightly. I used to think my job was boring. Just walking the same halls, checking the same locks. But it turns out even the smallest vigilance matters. Even when it's just a flashlight beam catching something that doesn't quite look right. A fake diamond in a real crown, David said. Or a real diamond in a fake story, Sarah added. Either way, someone had to care enough to look closer. They stood together for a moment longer. Three people whose lives had intersected because of a theft 40 years old, and a lie that couldn't hold. Then they went their separate ways. Into the morning, into their futures. Behind them, the museum opened its doors. People flooded inside, eager to see the crown, to stand before the sovereign star, to witness a piece of history. They saw beauty and heritage and tradition. They didn't see the security guard who'd noticed the truth, the detective who'd uncovered it, the young man who'd been brave enough to run and brave enough to return. But those stories were there too, invisible, important, like so much that matters. And somewhere in London, Margaret Ashford sat in a small apartment, looking at old photographs of her career, her achievements, her life's work, knowing she'd failed her greatest test, knowing she'd face consequences, but also knowing that the museum she loved still stood, that the crown was whole again, that the truth, however painful, was better than the alternative. She couldn't undo her choices, couldn't erase her crimes, but she could choose every day going forward to be someone different than who she'd been in her worst moments. That was what redemption looked like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just waking up each morning and choosing to do better. The sovereign star blazed in its case, catching light, scattering rainbows across marble floors, real at last, and that had to be enough.